Hello friends, today we're looking at this predictive programming idea once again because I've made some discoveries in the past week that I think everybody in this corner of the internet, if they're interested in so-called predictive programming, everybody should be aware of them. So we're going to talk about them in this here video, and as you can see on your screen here, I've got a few images that some of you will know why they're there. You'll remember these logos or these movies or these people or these events. Well, I've found some connections between them that I think are going to shock some of you. Some of you will be like, Joe, but I've never heard of these people. Fair enough. I'm going to try and explain that context, but what I've found, I think, needs to be seen to be believed, as it were. Now, this is all in the context of something that was published, well, I guess yesterday, Wednesday, August 7, 2024, commemorating 10 years since the West Africa Ebola outbreak. Now, let me ask you this. If you think of Ebola and predictive programming, does any body or any channel or any so-called movement come to mind? Of course, if you're new to this channel, if you're new to the idea of predictive programming, there are different people who wonder, why are there instances like this in The Simpsons, this 9/11, in an episode that aired years before the September 11 attacks? And my heart goes out to the families of the 3,000 dead people who died on 9/11 according to the official story. Don't come after me, Dave J. And of course, the passport for Neo in The Matrix, a film that was released in 1999. What are the chances that the passport expires on September 11, 2001? So you guys get the idea of predictive programming. I'm going to show you some connections here, and I want you to tell me, did you know about this? I don't think you did. If you did, let me know in the comment section below. And if you didn't know about it, what do you think? You don't have to believe me, but if the connections I've found are legitimate, I want you to tell me, how do you make sense of them? Because it seems to me that things are very different to what some people want us to believe. You see, I just finished my latest article on johnlebon.com. This is called Get With the Predictive Program. This is the most detailed article I've published on the website in literally years. This took me a week to write and to do all the research and to provide all of the references and links and information and evidence that backs up my new theory. I started writing this with a different theory, and I went to find the evidence, and the evidence went against what I thought was the case, and that's why it took so long to write this article, because I had to go back to the drawing board, and what I found shook me to the depths of my miserable soul. So if you're a member of johnlebon.com, go and check this out. This is the latest article at johnlebon.com, Get With the Predictive Program. Of course, if you're not a member of johnlebon.com, I've got some good news for you. There's some free content waiting for you at bombersations.com. This conversation with Tim Osman, where we spoke specifically about predictive programming, the different examples that some people believe prove that it's a real thing, the different perspectives, people like me, why do we have a different idea of why these things happen? We speak about it for an hour. I spent a couple of hours in post adding the different clips and cleaning up the audio to make it all sound nice and fantastic, and the feedback so far has been sensational. Thanks to those of you who've left your feedback following checking out this conversation. This is available for free, link in the comment section below. Now let's get back to this. So you've heard of predictive programming, but where did the idea come from? Well, if you look into this for yourself, there's a very good chance you're going to find out that the guy who helped to popularize this idea in the first place was none other than Alan Watt. And he supposedly did that around 2006. So you might think that predictive programming is this idea that's been around for a long time. Maybe it has. But based on the research I've done, and I presented all of my evidence and the documents, actually it was this guy circa 2006 who popularized the idea. But it didn't start getting big traction in the YouTube so-called truth movement until 2014, and I base this on doing research into Google Trends and when were people searching for certain key terms. This is something you can check for yourself. Just go to Google Trends and type in predictive programming, see what you notice. Of course, I've already done that, and I've provided the evidence in that article that I linked to, that I mentioned a moment ago. But the point is, it was 2014, and it was this guy, Jeff C. Can we write Jeff C here? Well, probably need a smaller pen, but you get the idea. Jeff C. Free Radio Revolution, Jeffrey as he liked to be called. He was the guy who popularized this idea of predictive programming in 2014, and if you don't believe me, go to Google Trends and type in predictive programming. It was October of 2014, and this guy was pumping out videos, and we're going to watch one of them in just a moment. He popularized this idea of predictive programming within the so-called YouTube truth movement, and his best friend at the time was a guy called Red Pill Revolution, later known as Truth Media Films. Now, both of them were saying that Ebola was a hoax and that the news coverage at the time was focused on the color green as part of some predictive programming thing that they were doing, that the media was doing, the government was doing. It was all about the green, they were saying. And like I said, we'll look at a video about that in just a moment. What's interesting is what happened a few months later. These two had a massive falling out over the TransAsia disaster, where Jeffrey was saying that the event was real and his heart goes out to the families, whereas Red Pill Revolution was saying that the event was a hoax and nobody died, nobody got hurt. Now, those of you who weren't there at the time might not be aware that there used to be, back in 2013 and 14 especially, and then into 2015, this so-called truth movement on YouTube, where there were dozens and dozens of content creators exposing and debunking the latest news story hoax. A bunch of them got together for weekly live streams. They were getting hundreds of live viewers. This is back when there was nothing like this at all. It was quite a phenomenon. It was going very well. Until this disaster. And suddenly these two, who had been the biggest promoters of predictive programming up to that point, they had a falling out, or so it would seem, over this plane crash. Now, what was strange about that plane crash? Well, there's a couple of strange things. One of them is that the film Knowing, which is all about so-called predictive programming, happens to have a major plane crash in the story. And not only that, one of the other main characters involved in this truth of war was a guy who was an actor in that film. Now, I don't expect you to believe me about any of this, but if you do your own research, you're going to find out this is true. Or you can just read my article. This is the most detailed article that I've put together for johnlebon.com. It literally it took me a week because there's so much information. You can just go and check this out. I provide all the evidence and all the links to show that what I'm saying is true. But you don't need me to do it. You can go do it for yourself. Look into this. This 2015 TransAsia plane crash in Taiwan, where this plane went into the Keelung River, led to a falling out between these two, who up until that point had been the leading promoters of predictive programming in the so-called YouTube truth movement, about 10 years after this guy had first put predictive programming on the map. This is Alan Watt. These are the two main characters in the falling out over this event. He says real, he says fake, totally splits the so-called truth scene in two. The other guy, the other main guy involved in that melee, that truth of war as I call it, was a guy who acted in this film Knowing, which happens to be about predictive programming, including a massive plane crash. This is all very suspicious stuff. Now, unfortunately, Jeffrey's channel is no longer available, and of course Jeffrey has reportedly passed away. My heart goes out to the families. But somebody has backed up his videos. In fact, they were backing them up at the time, back in October of 2014. Let's just take a look at a few seconds of this. This is very bizarre stuff. Take a look at this. So this is a Jeffrey C video. This is from October of 2014, where Jeffrey was saying that Ebola, which peaked in 2014 October, he was saying it was a hoax, and he was saying that there was a hoax code predictive programming. Just take a look at a few seconds of this and see what you notice.
I don't know, folks. Seems like they're trying to tell you something.
She joins us now. So Heather, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming on. Tell me what happened yesterday morning. How did you find out that you lived in the same apartment complex as Dina found?
So I got a knock at 5:30 in the morning, and
So this is a nurse who was supposedly a neighbor of one of the victims of this Ebola outbreak back in 2014. What do you notice here? It might be a bit too small if you're watching this on your phone or on a smaller tablet or what have you, but this looks like a CGI background with a retro green building, which fits in with Jeffrey's theory at the time about the color green, and what looks like a corona ball. Very strange stuff. The reason I share this with you is because I want your opinions. Let me know in the comment section below. Do you remember any of this? What do you make of it? This is 2014. This is 6 years before my coronas, and we're seeing a story about an outbreak, the biggest outbreak up until that point in time, according to some people, at least in contemporary times. And what looks like a green corona ball next to a green CGI futuristic building, next to a nurse wearing green talking about one of the so-called victims. This is a video from Jeffrey, by the way. Now, you might think that I'm just sitting here shitting on Jeffrey. That's not the case. I want to play for you something, just 1 minute of one of Jeffrey's videos, because I've been going back. I've been going back doing research into what was Jeffrey saying, what were the other people saying, what was going on back then. Because I need to know, where did this predictive programming idea come from? I know it might have started with Alan Watt, but who first promoted it to the so-called truth movement on YouTube 10 years ago? And that research has led me to some conclusions that I was not expecting. The last week has just been bizarre, going back, using different web search tools, finding as much information as I can and trying to connect the dots. It's really bizarre stuff, and like I said, I've got an article about that You can check that at johnlebon.com if you remember. But take a look at this. This is what Jeffrey said. This is from October 15, 2014. So we're talking the best part of 10 years ago. And he's talking about the Ebola so-called outbreak. Take a listen to this.
So I'm convinced that they are hoaxing this thing by and large. That doesn't mean that real Ebola doesn't exist. I can't, say 100% whether it does or not. Just because I watched a documentary here or a documentary there doesn't mean that Ebola exists. Just because it's been in our popular culture for so long doesn't mean it exists, and I don't trust anything off the corporate media. I'm saying it probably does exist, but it doesn't exist in the way that they're showing it right now, essentially. I believe that they are hoaxing this whole thing. And I said this months ago when this all started to come up. I said that my biggest fear was that they would fake a Ebola outbreak in order to force inoculations, force vaccines on it.
So he's saying back in 2014 that he thinks this Ebola outbreak, which at the time was a big deal, and again, all the research is there in my article. I show you the different Google trends and how much were different ideas trending at that time. Ebola was a huge deal. Obviously, it was totally gazumped. It was dwarfed a few years later by my coronas. But at that time, we didn't know corona was coming. At that time, 2014, Ebola was a huge story. So he's saying he thinks they're going to use that to try and force inoculations. Now, that didn't happen. We all know what did happen a few years later. Now, take a listen to this.
Everyone, I think that's what we're seeing is being played out. I think that's why we see all these psyops, because they're trying to convince you that Ebola is going to come and get you somehow, some way. And the alternative media has played a big part, because where the corporate media says things like, you don't need to worry, and you can only get it, you can't get, it's not airborne, stuff like that, the alternative media will say, well, look, we have proof that it is airborne, and we have this report and that report and all this, so it works.
Now, what Jeffrey just said was that at one point the corporate media was saying, don't worry about it, you're all going to be fine. And it was the truthers, it was a so-called alternative media who said, oh, no, it is airborne, they're hiding the truth from us. This is much more dangerous than you think. Well, guess what? That's exactly what happened in late 2019 and in early 2020. To begin with, the corporate media, as Jeffrey calls it, or just the mainstream narrative was, it's just a thing in China, they're going crazy, but we'd have nothing to worry about. That was the original story. And it was the truthers, it was the people on 4chan Poll and Reddit Conspiracy and different YouTube channels and blogs and Zero Hedge and Godlike Productions. They were the ones who were saying, oh, no, this is much worse. We've got these videos coming out of China. So there were these videos coming out of China of people locked in their apartments or supposedly welled in their apartments, collapsing on the street. It was the so-called alternative people. It was the awake people pushing the fear when the corporate or when the mainstream said, don't worry about it. Then in the space of a few days, it flipped. Now you've got this Dr. Michael Osterholm goes on Joe Rogan, says this is a big disaster, could kill 10% of the world. Then the Formula One stops, then the NBA stops, all the professional sports stop. And people are being told by their governments around the world, oh, stay home, stay safe. It totally flipped. And this gave the alternative people nowhere to go, because they just spent weeks, if not months, saying, oh, it's much worse. It's much worse than they're telling us. Well, then the mainstream story became, oh, it really is bad, actually. It was terrible. Stay home, stay safe, we're going to stop all the planes, we're going to stop the sports. So you see, they wrong-footed the alternative scene. And I've been talking about this from the beginning because I never fell for it. I never fell for the collapsing people in China or the welded. I never fell for it. In fact, I called the whole thing a hoax back in January of 2020, months before the mainstream said it's a big deal. So back when the truthers and the awake people were saying, oh, I've seen these videos of people in China collapsing, when the mainstream was saying, don't worry about it, and the truthers were saying, oh no, it's a big deal, I was saying, no, it's not a big deal. Those videos could be fake, there's nothing to worry about. And then, of course, when the narrative did a 180, when it flipped, and now the truth was like, uh-oh, I was like, no, there's still nothing to worry about, this is all completely fake. So I was right. But I was just impressed when I was going through Jeffrey's videos earlier today, as part of my research for this article that I just completed. Jeffrey was on the money on some things, and I think this is an example of that. Now, he wasn't on the money with everything. As we know, in the truth of wars, he made a few missteps that he never really recovered from. And then, of course, after TransAsia, there was the explosion of Flat Earth, where Jeffrey also backed the wrong horse and started defending moon landings and NASA, and really was a disaster. And that's what pretty much, let's go and change colour here, that's what pretty much ruined Jeffrey as a going concern here in the so-called truth scene. Can I do a big arrow on him? Wow, that'll do. Or what if I click on him there? There we go. Sorry, Jeffrey, you fucked up, mate. Pardon my language. Big mistake, especially when he came after me. Coming after John LeBon, big mistake. That was never going to work. And then, of course, his mate, Red Pill, eventually disappeared. We never heard from him again. Let's go and click on that, shall we? Ah, you get the idea. Anyway, so he ruled himself out, and so the whole thing's a big schmozzle. But I hope you guys get the point I'm trying to make here. If you do the research and look into where do things come from, you find some very strange stories. And for those of you who weren't here, back in the heyday of the so-called truth movement, you might not know all the shenanigans that went on, and how much is underneath the surface if you're willing to put the time in to look into it. The information's there. It's harder to find out because Google has changed, and even Yandex isn't the best. But if you know how to use different search engines, and if you know how to research, you can find quite a rich tapestry of this so-called truth scene, which is actually full of people, I think, they couldn't care less about the truth. All they care about is their feelings and their favorite talkers, and it's a disaster. But if you care about good conversation, go and check out my chat with Tim Osman, link in the comment section below. And if you're a member of johnlebon.com, go and check out this article. If you found this video interesting, this is the tip of the iceberg compared to what I found. This is available for members of johnlebon.com. It took me a week to research and write, and I'm very proud of it. And this might be the last detailed article that I write for a week or two, because I'm exhausted, but I think it was worth it. And like I said, what I discovered was different to what I expected. So I had to change my mind about a few things, had to go and research different areas that I wasn't expecting, and it's been quite an eye-opening experience. So go and check that out as well, and let me know in the comment section below, those of you who watch this video, what do you make of this predictive programming? Where did it come from? Who promoted it? What happened to them? Why did it happen? What's really going on here? Let me know in the comment section below, and have yourselves a lovely day.
John, thank you. Great job, John.
Yeah. And it's fine to say, I don't know, if you actually don't know.
But you can't really explain that to a normie. Their eyes glaze over. And
you got to deal with it, man.
John LeBon, I would be on your server. I would be everything. I love your stuff.
That is John LeBon sync going on right there. And I don't believe in sync.
Dodo, stand up. You are no longer extinct.
That's on ridiculousologist.com, not on my platform.
I thought I was fairly gentle with the guy, all things considered.
I am definitely the gift that keeps on giving